being able to bring, things that I've been taught in the restaurant career into a butcher shop and teach that to butchers that have been 20, 30 years in the industry and haven't seen that. And then, when they appreciate that, it's really, satisfying. So that's been a great thing.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. After 15 years working as a chef in some of the best kitchens in the world, Michael Robinson knew what was required to cook the best meat and create the best charcuterie. So in 2016, he took over a butchery with a long history and embarked on a new food journey. Michael, what was it like switching from chef to butcher?
For me, it was pretty similar in comparison because I'd always worked on the meat section in the kitchens. So for me, it was almost like being in a restaurant or a production kitchen environment, just without the actual sit-down dinner service.
Take us back to that time when you decided that making that transition was something that you wanted to do.
Well, that sort of came just out of the blue. I was working in a restaurant up here in the Hunter, and then somebody came actually to see if I'd potentially be interested in purchasing vegetables for the restaurant. But I sort of explained to him that I had handed in my notice and was looking at moving on to something new. And he sort of said, "Oh, well, I've got a few things happening in Branxton. Would you be interested in doing something?" And then we sort of toyed with a few ideas of what we could do here. And then we found out the butcher shop was available. So it just sort of eventuated from nothing, and here we are 6 years later.
Well, what were the challenges in the early days for you transitioning and taking over? What was it like?
Challenges were, I guess, trying to get the local crowd sort of understanding what we were trying to do. We were very cautious, I guess, of sort of changing everything straight up. When I first took over the shop, it was obviously very different to what it is now. The offering was quite basic and, as you'd expect from a sort of a quite quiet country town. But as the area has grown and over time, we sort of really adapted that to include a lot more of your high-end, products that we would be seeing in restaurants and whatnot. And, working with a lot of local farmers that we've developed the relationships over the 5-6 years, and sort of introducing that. But it sort of really worked well for us in that sense. The main challenges, I guess, have been staffing. I guess, obviously, as what we have, as with most people these days, is staff just seem to be a challenge, full stop, for everybody, unfortunately.
Tell us a little bit about the history of the butchery that you did take over, and I want to explore what the changes are that you've made.
Yeah, of course. So it's been a butcher shop since 1937 when it was built. It was built by a man named Claude Hungerford, who he was obviously the first one to have it, and then there was 3 generations of Hungerfords in it after him, and then it was sold to another family up here who's also got sort of 3 generations of butchers as well, and that's who we bought the shop from. So yeah, I mean it's been, well, it's 1937, whatever it is now. So it's a heritage-listed building. It's always been a butchery, smokehouse, and it's always had like a big sort of role in this little town of Branxton. It's been, being a small town, it's been a local shop that people and families have grown up with, and so for us to sort of come in and keep the tradition of that going was a big thing that I wanted to do, and also. It's important for the town as well, I think, that we don't sort of lose that history that it had. But in terms of the offering and stuff, the changes that we've made, it was mainly, it was a lot just sort of introducing new lines that I guess a lot of people hadn't really heard of. And, if we had have come in 5 or 6 years ago with some cured meats and stuff like that, I don't think a lot of the customers would have really understood what it was. But yeah, they've sort of really grown to it and taken to it quite well.
You mentioned the importance of connecting with local farmers. Do you have any stories of the pig farmers that you connect with and what sort of product they're creating for you?
Yeah, of course. So the pig farmers, we we've sort of had a few over the time. The pigs have sort of been an easier one to find the consistent supplier of up here. We do get free range pigs as sort of our basic level of pigs that we're getting from Malanda Park. But we also use for our Berkshires and the heritage breeds we get from Near River now, who we've been working with Andrew for quite some time. We were using also Extraordinary Pork, Michael with Extraordinary Pork up near Dubbo, but unfortunately they ceased their pig farming operation late last year, which was very heartbreaking. But then we've also got another fella who we do a lot of work with. He's actually a doctor, but he has a fully sort of regenerative farming operation out in Woodville. So he does a lot of pigs for us, Angus, and some Muscovy ducks and stuff as well. So, yeah, we've sort of been working with him for 3 or 4 years now. And, yeah, he's a very, very passionate sort of, I guess, hobby pharmacist, I guess, as such, because it's not his main income. But he's very, very passionate about what he does, and he's been very great to work with because he's, really interested in trying new things and growing things how we want to, have them for the shop. And, yeah, he's been great to work with.
You're dealing with different farmers and different breeds of pigs. What are you looking for from a pig for what you want to offer the market?
Depending on so if it's for the butcher shop, we'll be looking for the heritage breed. We sort of always try for the pasture raised. Fat content, good fat content, but we have to be careful because we're not cooking it. It does sort of become it's a different thing. If you get it in the kitchen, you can render it down or treat that fat appropriately, whereas the average customer that comes in, they just see a lot of fat and think, no, I don't want to pay that. So it's about finding that sort of happy medium on that front, but also having the story behind it of where we know where it's grown from, who grew it, what it was fed, etc., etc. And using the whole animal obviously is a really big thing in the shop. But for the charcuterie side of it, it's sort of the opposite. We want it to be older. We want it to be a lot fattier. We want it to be much bigger. But we still also obviously want it to be pasture-raised if possible, know where it's come from, and it's been looked after. Generally what we do with those is we have been getting a lot of sow, so retired sows from those farms that we mentioned before. So when they sort of retire out, finish their journey on the farm, then we can really take advantage of that product then.
I want to explore what you're doing with Mr. Charcuterie and all the stuff that you're making there. But you had a career as a chef prior to this. Take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
If I'm honest, I didn't come from a family where it was a big Sunday roast thing or something like that. Food was just what we ate, sort of thing. You know what I mean? We weren't a massive foodie family. So to have a career in food is sort of a bit ironic, I guess. I sort of fell into that as well. But my stepfather was Argentinian, so it was always actually beef, and he didn't eat chicken, so everything was just red meat. So we ate a lot of red meat as a kid, and no fish and nothing like that. So I guess that sort of shaped my career I've always wanted to be in the meat side of it, even in the kitchens and what. So, yeah, I mean, we didn't really come from obviously we had our traditional family, Nan's spaghetti bolognese and, all that sort of the classic dishes that every family has. But I wouldn't say that we were a huge foodie family, I guess, until later in life. Now we sort of do a lot more with food.
You mentioned that you kind of fell into the hospitality industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so after school, I guess I went through to year 12, and then I just didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, and was looking for work, and started a job in a wood-fired pizza kitchen, and ended up in their production kitchen. So that was sort of a really interesting thing to see, mass volumes of production getting pumped out, and it was all very new, and when you're the young kid in there amongst some older guys, it gets a bit exciting, and, you sort of just fall into it. And I don't know, for lack of a better word, you get trapped and sort of, you don't think of anything else. You sort of see what's there. And so that was sort of that first introduction to it. And then we moved into the restaurant wood fire pizzas. And then that was the sort of the excitement of the service and everything. And that was like, wow, it was a whole new thing and just exciting. I sort of thought, well, I really enjoy this and meeting lots of great people. And I just sort of thought, well, why not? I could see if I could do something with this. And then decided to move out of that sort of fast foody sort of vibe and move into something a bit more serious and see what we could learn about food and meat and stuff in particular.
What was that first sort of serious kitchen that you stepped into, and do you have any stories of what that was like?
Yeah, so I guess I started, it wasn't a serious kitchen, but I started at Star City just early on, and I met a pastry chef there who I then he sort of said, you need to go and work in some more serious restaurants, and I sort of, his wife was also a pastry chef, and I ended up at Cafe Sydney for a little while, and that was big volume and actually cooking on the grill, and that's where I first learned to cook meat. And then I actually that's where I met Monty Kaludrovic actually, and he told the head chef at the time that I wanted to learn how to cook on the wok. So I didn't know this, but apparently that's what I said, and I ended up spending 6 months cooking on the wok section, so that was quite interesting. It was a bit of a stitch up from Monty, but that was all fun. And then from there, so the pastry chef moved to Bathers, and I moved with her to Bathers Pavilion. And then that was sort of my first introduction to, French fine dining, real sort of serious food, people doing it for a career. And then I just sort of was taken aback and I guess blown away. I was still quite young. I was like, wow, this is definitely where it's at. If I was going to be putting the effort and the time into, cooking food, I wanted to be doing it at quite a high level. So that was back in 2000, I think that was when I started. So I was still, quite high in the scale of the food scene at the time. But that was certainly a shock to go from somewhere that was quite casual to there. I was like, wow, like getting paid to pick time leaves and stuff like that. It was a bit of a change, but it was a great learning curve.
What were some of the venues that really sort of helped sort of carve your career and take you overseas eventually as a chef? So
from Bathers, I went to London, and again, I ended up working with Monty because he was over there at the time, and we ended up working together there for another year, I think it was, at La Trompette. That was a great learning curve, but I think if anything, I sort of learnt, if I had to choose one venue where I really sort of learnt how to treat food and cook properly, I would have to say that was my time at Picasso, because when I was in London, it was great, but it was still, it was a bit, I was overseas, it was fun, it was a bit party time sort of stuff, but still serious about work and whatnot. But when I came back from the US, I then ended up working with Monty again, so it was a third time with Monty, three times the charm. And then that was with Justin and James Metcalf and all that, obviously. So that was a real eye opener, and I was only meant to be there for 6 months, and I ended up being there for nearly 6 years. So it was certainly a huge part of my career. And I think a lot of what I know today is due to my time there.
Justin North and Picasso was known for using different parts of the same beast and featuring them on a plate. Do you have any stories of a pork dish where the sort of whole beast was celebrated?
Whole beast, we used to do a lot of suckling pigs, I guess, when there was that time where that was a huge thing. Everybody sort of seemed to be using suckling, so we used to just sort of play with those a lot in sort of different ways, and we tried slow cooking the whole things, ballantine the whole things, or doing little different assiettes, I guess, as you do. But probably the standout pork dish that I remember from there was a really, really simple one. I think it was just on the lunch menu, and it was just a curabita pork rump with a sauce charcuterie and pomme puree. Like, it was just something so simple, but that quality of the pork, and it was really, really stood out, and just yeah, it was really, really fantastic dish, but just so simple. You know, you could spend so much time trying to do something intricate with the little suckling pig and, you know, have your little French cutlets and whatnot. But yeah, it's still the one that stood out was just the rump on a plate. So
you mentioned that you were working in the Hunter at the time of switching over to butchery. What drove you to be in that region?
Family. So I moved up here. Well, obviously after Becasse unfortunately fell apart in the new complex over at Westfield. I was actually the head chef of Quarter 21 at that time, but that was a really, really tough time, and I think I just needed a change personally for many reasons. But I had family up here. My mum had moved up here or to Newcastle to be closer to her mother, my grandmother. So that sort of just made me explore a few different options, and I had a call about an opening of a restaurant up here, and I thought, why not? I needed to get out of Sydney and try something different. But yeah, it was still sort of I didn't know whether I was going to stay in Australia or go back to London or what. But it, you know, I just ended up coming up here, and I've been here since.
You've now doing some amazing charcuterie. Tell us about when that all started and some of the challenges and hurdles of getting that right.
So that sort of started, I guess, from my time at Becasse, and I was on the meat section at Becasse. I started on the meat section and sort of ended up doing about 3 or 4 years straight on there. And Justin at the time was doing a lot of whole animal sort of stuff. So, you know, it was easy to use up your primal cuts and whatnot. But, you know, we had use for pork mince and stuff in terrines and whatnot. But then there was sort of these other muscles that, I mean, at the time in that style of restaurant, we couldn't really, you know, in hindsight we could have, but we probably couldn't really put them on the plate back in that time. They were a bit sort of underused. So we just always ended up with all these extra cuts that we had to use up, and I just sort of started playing with them and curing and whatnot, and it sort of just became a thing that I did and just sort of self-taught. And, you know, obviously there was some guidance from other people, but yeah, I mean, it's something that I've just always played with. I've been fascinated by it, the fact that you can essentially, you know, I used to say back in the day that it was amazing that you could leave something to essentially rot and then it becomes better and you could sell it for even more money. So it was, I guess it sort of stemmed from that fascination. Like, obviously it's not rotting, I know that, but yeah, at the time it was just fun, new, and yeah, just sort of, I started doing a few basic things and then just wanted to try more and more. And yeah, it was fortunate that Justin was, you know, willing to let me play with that produce and sort of learn it all from there.
Do you remember your first real success in the art of charcuterie?
I'd say probably for curing meats, it would be a Bresaola. I did a Wagyu Bresaola. It's not pork, I know, but it was a Wagyu Bresaola, and it's still the recipe that I use, very, very similar recipe to what I use to this day. So it was a winner, I thought, at the time, and everybody else seemed to like it. I don't know if they were just saying that, but it seemed to work all right, and we still use it now. So that was probably my first success, and then I sort of moved on to terrines and stuff. But Justin was always very, very good at terrines, so I guess I sort of felt I had to do something good with those, otherwise it was sort of going to be frowned upon. So it was. Yeah, that was always the pressure test, I guess, the terrines and stuff.
Take us through some of the range that you have with Mr. Charcuterie, utilising different bits of the pig.
Yeah, so we do, in our standard range, we sort of do, we use sows as well. So we use the copper from the neck, obviously. We use the lonza or the loin. We do a lomo. We cure the fillets. We do colatello. What else we do? Sometimes we do whole leg prosciuttos. Sort of depends on what's available. We do have obviously our standard range that we sort of do for more of our wholesale side of that. But when we do get a whole pig or something like that we can't, like for example last delivery we had a pig that was a little bit too fatty for the restaurant, so we just cut up the whole thing into different cuts and try different cures, and that's sort of how we experiment nowadays with it, I guess. Rather than say, no, we don't want it, we can't use it, it's too fatty. It gives us that opportunity to still work with the farmers and, use up those animals that are a bit fattier or whatnot. So, yeah, using pretty much, well, we use all the pig, obviously. We're making pancetta and stuff from the bellies. And I think that's the jows and stuff. We do a bit of jow bacon. But yeah, otherwise I'll go into any, like, we do like a pat en croûte, which is, sort of varies of what we've got to put there's no set recipe for that. We just change it up as we go, depending on what's available.
What's one of the lines that you make that you really enjoy making? And can you take us through the process of what it takes to make it?
I would say at the moment, I do really enjoy making the pat en croûtes. It's something that we've sort of only just started doing in the last sort of year or so. That's for the Mr. Charcuterie side. In the other thing that we've really been developing a lot at the moment is our bacon and hams. So we've been fortunate enough where we've sort of been able to set up a wholesale supply for wholesale for bacon and ham, so boneless ham. So I guess that, because we still do it all by hand, so having it hand tied, like boning out the legs, hand tying them, injecting them with the brine and curing them, and then the smoking process, so taking it through that whole process, and then when it's cooked, it's cooled down, having that first cut in it, and the little things like making sure you haven't got any brown spots where you've missed the cure, or it's tied nice and tightly. I think that's quite, it's that sense of achievement, I guess, when you do that. So that's always a pleasurable thing to do these days, and also teaching the younger guys, how to do those and have the appreciation of that as well.
What makes a great bacon and a great leg bone-in sort of ham?
For me, it's definitely the smoke. I like it to be quite smoky. We do a sort of a double, or if not a triple smoke on most of our products. And then certainly a slow cook. I mean, it needs to be sort of slow and gentle, but not drying it out, I guess, is a huge thing. But then, yeah, it comes back to the curing process as well. Making sure it has been cured properly is a huge thing. Otherwise, you just end up with spots that taste like roast pork. And, yeah, it's the whole process is obviously very important, but there's little things that need to be done right, which are quite simple, but if they're not done right, it can be a major upset when you do go to serve them.
You mentioned that you changed the butchery quite significantly, but in a slow manner. You didn't introduce charcuterie straight away. But what's the response been to this sort of high level offering that you're providing the community there?
It's been fantastic. We've been very fortunate to have some very loyal customers who completely understand what we're trying to do. Fortunate enough to be close enough to the wineries, so get a lot of the support from all the local wineries and stuff who send their customers to check us out when they're looking for things. Also the accommodation places in the valley, a lot of them send customers our way when they're looking for barbecue stuff. But yeah, I mean, the response has been fantastic. We've just undergone a major renovation in the shop, so it's just reopened last week. So it's looking very, very, very different to what it used to. But as I said, it's a heritage building, so it sort of had to remain somewhat the same. But yeah, we've been fortunate enough to do some quite major works and sort of expand our operation and offering.
What sort of benefits have there been from coming from a career as a chef and moving into butchery? Do you see the role in a different light, do you think, than someone who's just been a butcher all their life?
I would say yes, definitely. Some butchers might not agree, but I think you have sort of, I mean, you've seen it on the other side. So, I mean, a lot of butchers that have spent their time working in a country, little town butcher shop, they've only seen sort of, your butcher sausages and, your crumb stuff, your old school Kievs and all that sort of stuff that everybody loves. But it's they haven't really seen it. Like, the thing that I noticed was a lot of people, that they hadn't even seen Wagyu and stuff like that. So there was a huge sort of hole in the market, I guess, up here for that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's not really a hole in the market anymore. But yeah, there wasn't really that understanding of it as what chefs and that in the industry have. And being so close to the wineries, it's just sort of seemed strange that you could sort of drive 10 minutes up the road and be served a 2-hat meal, and then come 10 minutes back this way and the best thing you've got is a piece of crumb chicken or something. So not that there's anything wrong with a piece of crumb chicken, but it's, these are two different worlds. So I think for me personally, having seen that side of it and having cooked it has certainly helped the shop grow, definitely.
The hours of a chef are very different to that of a butcher. How much has this sort of career shift changed for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, the hours are certainly a lot better. There's not so many, 75, 80-hour weeks and stuff anymore, but being the owner, there sort of is a lot of hours still involved. But, I've got a young family now, and I guess when I was in kitchens and looking for the next step, a lot of my brain was saying, this isn't something you can do for the rest of your life. You're going to have kids soon, hopefully, and you're going to have to look for something different. And I've always sort of had the idea that hopefully one day I could get into something with charcuterie or something like that. So having this sort of fall upon itself has just been amazing, pretty much.
You've created one of the best butchers in Australia. What do you love about what you do?
I really love, obviously being able to still be involved in that food industry. So we do a lot of wholesaling to restaurants. So I guess I sort of get to see the better side of that industry. For not that there's always negative sides, but I'm not there for the hard yakka anymore in their businesses. I get to see the good side of restaurants, go and eat at restaurants a lot more. So that's sort of been a great thing. But I love also, we've got some young apprentices and stuff here that they barely knew what chicken was when they started here, and to see them now, smoking bacons and tying hams and doing all that sort of stuff is pretty satisfying. To you've helped shape people's careers and being able to bring things that I've been taught in the restaurant career into a butcher shop and teach that to butchers that have been 20, 30 years in the industry and haven't seen that, and then when they appreciate that, it's really satisfying. So that's been a great thing.
Well, Michael, it's incredible what you've created there and what you're educating the next generation with as well. We've loved having you on the Crackling today to hear a bit of your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Anthony. Cheers.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.